Greetings, everyone. This is far from the first video I've tried recording since my last one uploaded, but problem after problem has been occurring. Technical difficulties keep happening. And honestly, I will say ahead of time, this video is probably going to have a lot of technical difficulties here, since I'm using a camera that's different than my usual one. And while no one else can hear it, I can very distinctly hear a strange kind of buzz to the audio that tends to be recorded with this camera whenever I use it for videos. Hence why I've always had audio or video recorded with this camera scrapped and instead decided to use different cameras. I can't really do that here because the other one is broken and needs to be repaired, so just noting ahead of time that this audio will probably be lower quality than what you're used to. I can't really do anything about that, sadly. Anyway. Of course, if you've read the title, then you understand that this video will be about explaining the character of serial designation in from Murder Drones. Let's just jump right into that because it has been too long since I've gotten a chance to truly work on a Murder Drones video like this. Anyway, serial designation in experiences a problem of a Murder Drones community that I absolutely hate. A problem that only Jay shares. The community just does not understand his character even remotely. With V and Uzi, it's understandable to a degree. People understand the characters well enough, even if they don't understand all the depths. I'd even say the same for Sin. But just nobody even bothers trying with J or N. And this video is specifically about N, but I did want to establish that it was both of them. With N, people always, for some reason, hype up the surface level degrees to N's character and the obvious, but never look at all into the deeper aspects of N's character. People always want N to be some generic, poorly written character, yet will endlessly hype up that terrible written version that exists in our mind and try to treat him as the best character despite that. Which creates this problem where N as a character is very underrated and undervalued in the community. But the most bland and generic aspects of N are worshipped and treated as this insane god-tier writing. And that's what this video will be about. You see, to understand N's character, you have to not just look at the surface, but at everything about N. On the surface level, you get to see that N is a very wholesome character. He has very high energy, specifically high golden retriever energy. And is always a lot more optimistic than everyone else. Yeah, there's a bit of a childish tone at times, and is the second most, I guess, silly character in the story, right behind Sin in that regard. And all that is well and good, and it's entertaining to say the least, but then you have to look at what's under that. As you see, under that, there's something that gives this positivity and optimism weight. There's a contrast there. Because a big thing is that you have to think about how in circumstances affected this, and about the question, is this healthy or an unhealthy way for him to tackle his PTSD? In Murder Drones, you could very much present a good argument for both. To anyone who somehow doesn't know N's backstory, he was, of course, a worker drone created on Earth that was destroyed rather early after his creation and sent to the junkyard, where he was later retrieved and fixed by Tessa James Elliott, who is vaguely related to Lord Frontalbucket. So, or is that, we still don't really know much about them, though. Anyway, in addition to that, he lived with the others fixed by Tessa, mainly V, J, and Sin, for an unspecified amount of time, less than a year, before it was revealed that Tessa was actually planning to kill everyone there, and successfully did so. And in that time prior, Tessa had been cloning them consistently and twisting the worker drones into disassembly drones in order to enact this plan of genocide against the humans, to eat them all and the planet itself, while spreading this same plot to the universe as a whole. And like V and J was lobotomized multiple times in the process, but and particularly doesn't have as many memories of this throughout most of his series, both through it being erased constantly and actual repression of it. This is shown mainly in episode 8, where it directly shows the memories at the worst portion truly bleeding back to N, where he sees Sin tearing V apart. There are slight flashbacks prior as well, with episode 2 showing the moment it all started, with Sin being brought to the Elliott Manor after Tessa, and of course, that happens right after N gets introduced as well. We don't know exactly when, but N is already there at the time. And then there's also the flashback in Murder Drones episode 4, after N touches the zombie drone VHS, where he sees Sin eating a human arm outside of the Elliott Manor, while the Singularity floats in the sky. Or the Null, I should say. This is really where the question comes in. Is N's constant optimism about everything healthy or unhealthy? This is a question I've really thought of lately after discussing it with someone on Twitter. It's complicated because I'd actually say he has the best way of handling it, and isn't doing the best throughout the story overall, but with the way he's handled things, it always feels well done, and has his bad moments, but he always chooses to see the silver lining. He always ends up moving forward and handles things with what I'd say is a level of emotional maturity, being able to understand his problems but also get over them and keep moving forward, also being able to help and understand others' problems and talk with them about it. On the other end, as the person I was arguing with has mentioned, you could also see his methods as unhealthy because it involves heavily repressing memories at some certain points. And in the end, it has been shown that N is definitely dealing with a lot of mental issues under the surface anyway, as shown in episode 8, where his PTSD flashbacks truly at their main source revealed there. And we learned why Innocent is constantly getting those flashbacks to Sin. It all links back to one particularly horrible moment with Sin. And yet, it is also important to acknowledge that indefinitely, there's this rule that every time, no matter how bad things are, someone has had it worse, and the same is true in Murder Drones, and had it absolutely terribly. But, of course, V and J are a lot more psychologically damaged than N, because they actually remember everything that happened. They were able to retain their memories and knowledge of everything, and that, of course, ends up with them going very different directions development-wise. The thing is, while Jay ended up being a workaholic who pretty much just mad at everyone related to the incident, is too afraid of Sin to do anything about Sin's actions, is still being manipulated, and ends up with nothing, completely isolated from the rest after losing. And V ends up suicidal after the incident, and yet is stuck just going through life anyway. N is different. N's PTSD, while bad, is manageable. It's something that he manages to deal with in the moment, and while it always gets to him in short bursts, it never dampens his mood permanently, which is a big portion of why I personally lean towards it being healthy by comparison. And has been through a lot, but it's stuff he can actually handle. And of course, there is also his moment where let me rephrase. There's episode 7, which in particular is a big portion of why I think N's character is very underappreciated. Everyone, and I mean everyone I was speaking to on Reddit at the time, insistently kept suggesting that N's character should just be this overly edgy, generic character that he just isn't. Everyone wanted him to absolutely lose it and snap there. They wanted his wholesome character vibes to just vanish. They wanted N's optimism gone, and they just wanted N to absolutely go ballistic to save V, or because he lost V. And that's just not how his character is, and episode 7 handled the subject much better than that. Yet, it often really goes underappreciated. In episode 7, N is very stressed out about the circumstances with V. He does try to save V at the start, but it's pointless and just ends up making things worse down in the cave, or the caverns below, the cabin fever labs leading into the cathedral. After he realizes that it's not working and that Uzi still needs help. He immediately shifts focus to instead making sure Uzi is okay and protecting her from Sin. But of course it doesn't work because he accidentally just makes the situation worse yet again by openly throwing out that there's a possibility of Uzi being hurt, even though he's clearly trying to warn Tessa not to try anything. And after that goes wrong, and immediately starts, I guess, wallowing in pity for a second, and then immediately tries to essentially hack his arm off so that he could free himself, and again search for Uzi to help her. And is a character that consistently deals with these horrible situations and circumstances, but no matter what, he always looks forward and never lets himself just get stationary for too long. He always looks for how to fix a situation rather than letting himself get crushed by it. Kind of like how the cavern crushed him after the null. But it's something that is very noticeable when you really look through the story. As the episode goes on, he gets increasingly impatient. His patience is increasingly tested as he learns more about Sin's plan and the mysteries going on, and figures out that he's been lied to. The moment Sin, who was again pretending to be Tessa, the moment she didn't answer his question about if she knew there was a patch, and immediately decapitated her on the spot because he knew that she was planning something and that it was a malicious scheme so that he could, and he decapitated her, of course, to save Uzi because he wasn't going to make the same mistake, and he knew that there was a solution without Sin successfully killing Uzi. Afterwards, he was completely willing to face Uzi with Nori's help, despite the fact that Uzi was in her solver form and perfectly willing to kill them in the moment. And just, despite everything, consistently refused to fatally harm Uzi in any way, and made sacrifices at multiple points at his own risk, just so that he could appeal to Uzi directly against the solver and get her to free herself from its control. And is in some ways naive, but as I said, also in some ways very emotionally and mentally mature compared to the others, and handles things in a way that, okay, to any adult watching this video, please, I'm curious, how many, if you take a shot every time I say handles in this video, please be sure to tally that up. But anyway, the way In handles his problems in the story just consistently manages to be, in my opinion, the most mature decision in each outcome, and has always succeeded because, simply put, he never gives up on things, and instead, when things get bad, he just gets better. With episode 7 at the end, his plan to help Uzi succeeds, but then Sin attacks anyway. When Uzi gets dragged through the core of the planet, In doesn't just give up right then and there, like a lot of other characters do in situations like this in fiction, and immediately steals Jay's landing pod, or ship, and uses it to instead find Uzi in space and bring her back to Copper 9. Anyway, it just really is important to understand that what we see on the surface is not N's full character. I will be splitting this video into 2 parts of uneven length. I'll be cutting this video here real quick. Sorry about that. I didn't want the recording getting too long and cutting out on its own, so I decided to quickly stop the footage there and continue from here. Anyway, and even below that, it's just important to understand that N's character, no matter how optimistic it is, that's not all it is. N has reasons that he's such an optimistic character. He has circumstances that make this optimism mean anything. Because the truth is, the circumstances of a character is one of the main things that's supposed to shape how they are as characters. So when their conflicts change, or when their conflicts really contradict the nature of a character, that raises interesting questions and really demands you look more into it. N's character is very wholesome in a world filled with unwholesome problems. After everything N's been through, he still hasn't let that shape him, no matter how much his circumstances are a part of who he is. They don't necessarily change who he is at all. And that's one of the big differences. V used to be a lot different of a person back when she was just a worker drone. Over time, her horrible circumstances have changed V to the point where she's become very jaded, depressed, and, again, suicidal. Have I been saying V or J the entire time? That entire sentence was about V. And with J, yet again, she's become jaded, but in a different way. She's rather misanthropic, I'd say. Is very fearful of sin, and very nihilistic. Jay just has nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, and is too terrified of the consequences. So she just continues working harder and harder, putting her work before what she cares about, just like she did with Tessa back in episode 5. And we get to see how Jay herself is not happy with this, but she also just doesn't have a happy ending for anything. No matter what, it's bad for her. Anne is the one that breaks this rule. This just rule of bleakness that surrounds everyone. And because of that, it allows V's character to develop as well, as they form more of a connection across the story, and as they both form more of a connection to Uzi. Jay never had that chance, and just ended up doubling down on everything, until it was even worse. And in the end, Jay is stuck fixing her landing pod alone, supposedly to isolate from the society of worker drones to begin with. Everyone has some form of positivity in their ending, but Jay has nothing. Just the emptiness of isolation. Everything positive partly is because of N's own efforts to handle things differently after everything had been stacked against him. No matter how we look at it, things would not have gone well if N and Uzi never met and never teamed up here. Uzi would have not only had to deal with all the disassembly drones, most likely before even learning about the solver, but she could have easily been killed by Dahl before learning about the solver as well without having any help. And she definitely never would have been able to go to Cabin Fever Labs in the first place if she hadn't met in. All the circumstances with the disassembly drones were crucial to Uzi's story, and therefore it would have been impossible for Uzi to do anything to save the worker drones either, or their society, had it not been for N being different and teaming up with Uzi towards the end of the Murder Drones pilot. Another important thing I think people gloss over is that, for example, N and V have Uzi as their admin. That means that essentially instead of Sin, Uzi has complete access to their systems. Uzi is the system administrator. She controls the disassembly drones N and V. Sin is the one that has control of J, which is another thing. Because N and V teamed up with Uzi, inevitably they got freed from Sin's control. Whereas J, again, this really just reinforces the same point I've been saying, but J ended up alone, and because of that, ended up stuck under Sin's control, all the way up till Sin was defeated. There's just many, many steps to the plan, all showing how badly things were for J, and even N, and how N has handled it and made the best possible outcome for himself. Whereas J, in the end, chose the wrong side and ended up getting the worst possible outcome. Murder Drones is a story that has a lot better writing than people actually give it credit for. I've seen so many people make up fake plot holes, misunderstand characters in order to criticize them for being shallow or not doing how these people want them to act, for not doing the things they want them to do, and for just, in general, not lining up with their preconceived image of what the characters should be, which particularly has happened with both N and J, arguably even V. And it's just really disappointing. The Murder Drones community, a lot of people complain about communities having toxic fandoms, but the problem with the Murder Drones community is you can't even call it a fandom anymore, because a fandom is just the hatedom. No matter how you look at it, go onto the subreddit, try talking about how much you love Murder Drones, or specific aspects of it, you're most likely going to be met with just a bunch of criticism for the show and whatever you like about it, to be called a fanboy. Or, the third option, they'll just give backhanded compliments, saying, saying something like, Murder Drones is not very well written, but still I love, etc. They often make backhanded compliments insulting the show before even saying anything good, because the community is allergic to praising anything in good faith. With most of the criticisms people have towards the writing or anything else in it tend to be very stupid and involve basically putting their headcanons as the canon, ignoring all the authorial intent, and instead just consistently trying to make the story something it isn't, because they're more loyal to their image of the show than what it actually is, and their idea of what it is, of what it should be, is all they will ever care about. The same applies to characters, which is why I really felt it was important to finish this video. It is a very great character, and the community is way too shallow when it comes to looking into In's character. It is the type of character who literally got dissected in episode 6 and was helping the person who was doing the dissecting and encouraging them, because in the end, In just wants to help everyone as much as possible, and understands that others have their own problems and need help and support at times. And also has times where he needs it. There's a direct contrast between him and Uzi, where in episode 2, Anne kept reaching out to Uzi and trying to help when she was having a problem. And in episode 6, Uzi had to reach out to Anne when he was having a problem, after, of course, learning that Sin was planning on killing Uzi. It's really important to understand how In's character develops and the depth it contains. Which, another thing, people like to say Murder Drone's characters are static, but that's not true. Developing isn't a character doing a complete 180 on everything they stand for across the series. Development is a character growing over time, learning better ways, learning to fix problems, more information about their character being revealed, experiencing struggles psychologically, and over time, either overcoming them or adapting to fix them or avoid them. Character arcs can also go negative with development at times, which Anne also experiences. It's a lot of hate for nothing, and is a very well-written character, as is Jay. People are just shallow and think that if a character doesn't become an edgelord, or doesn't do a complete 180, and even just doesn't get a redemption arc in Jay's case, they all think that they're sloppy, terribly written characters if they don't fit any of that criteria there. It's just sad. Genuinely, I feel like anyone who truly understands writing, who truly understands the nuance behind it, and the decisions that writers have to make for their characters, and the importance of the author's vision over interpretation, because, again, a big thing is that people really prefer their own interpretations of things rather than the author's vision, which is the most important part behind any story. It's just, there's so much I could say about this, but I feel like this video is dragging on way too long. Just the final point is that Uzi and In really complement each other as characters. They both help each other develop. Envy as much as I don't ship it, was an important part of the story as well, because the way that it didn't work out also helped develop and Envy's characters and push them in the direction of their respective character arcs. People really also need to look more into the subtleties and intricacies of writing itself, because once you truly put yourself into a writer's mindset, you could think more logically about the paths characters go into and what each decision early on actually means and does for their character arcs in the future and the path they're intended to be on. With Murder Drones, that's more important than any other story, because in the end, Murder Drones isn't a show that's going to explain everything out loud to you and hold your hand through everything. It's meant to be analyzed, dissected ahead of time. It's meant for people to really look into it and understand it through show and not tell. Anyway, there's probably like 3 points so far where I've made what I wanted to be my final point. I've been stretched out to a new tangent, so I'm just gonna end this video here. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, which, yes, I know people don't actually tend to do that when they hear it, but seriously, please do. I've been waiting way too long to hit that 500 subscriber milestone, and I do not want to give up on that, especially so close to the end of the year. At the very least, I want to be able to hit it by the end of next year, but my true goal is to hit it this year.